Um,
Hi, Rajen. Great to have you with us. I always love speaking to our subscribers who are doing interesting things. And you're somebody who's straddled from consulting to writing to movie making. So I think that you exemplify a portfolio of careers in a very interesting way. But could you just tell us a bit about who you are and how you got here?
I guess I'm currently a client partner with Conferry Singapore, and I work in the area of leadership development, organization advisory, and also in the upcoming field of ESG, particularly from a people perspective.
Awesome. And I see that there are these movie posters. So connect the dots between Conferry, McKinsey, and movies, and then we'll explore other themes.
So I think I have the unique privilege of perhaps being one of the few that got a chance to set my foot on an IIM campus as well as FTII. And so in that sense, for about 6 to 7 years, I led a double life after my MBA. In the day, I was a management consultant, advising banks on credit card processes. And in the night, I was writing heist movies. So that's the kind of double life that I was living until I went for a leadership program. This was when I was with McKinsey as a participant. And the truth of the matter is that while I went to this public enrollment leadership program and told myself that, yeah, I was very humble and I was here to learn. And I was like, okay, what can you tell me about leadership? It was somewhere at day 2 or so of the program that it dropped on me that the program was not about leadership, but about me. This is where I found how I could get rid of the excuses of my life of not being a full-time screenwriter or a full-time consultant. And everything that I was able to blame, from Indian culture to parents to everything else, I was able to see that I could actually bring these two worlds together. What attracted me to screenwriting was looking at characters, looking at putting them in situations of choices and seeing what choices do they make, and do those choices then lead them to be better human beings or leads to their downfall. And now I suddenly realized that by getting into the world of leadership development, I could do this with real people. I could have a little chance to be that one little humble nudge in the life of somebody so that they could make choices that have them grow rather than fall. So that's how Conferry, McKinsey, movie making, business, creative, people, all of that sort of comes together.
Yeah, I love the answer because it explores intersectionality, a theme that we come across often on NC. So could you give us how you got started in your side hustle, which became something really important in your life, and I think today helps you do your job much better. But we'll come to all of that. Tell us about your first break, a real break in movies.
So it was actually quite interesting. I went to, well, first of all, during undergrad and also during IMCAL, I was the dramatic secretary and I was doing all kinds of creative stuff in advertising. I always imagined that I would end up being in advertising until, of course, CAT happened. And I think there is still an inquiry going on as to how did this guy get into, like, there's something wrong with our systems. But to answer your question, how did I get my first break, was that I'd already been 3 years in consulting then. And I just decided I needed to take a break. Sorry, can we pause this? Because I think my mom needs a bit of support. I'm just going to... Utkarsh?
Yeah, I think Varya should be able to edit this.
Yeah,
But yes,
I
please
just
carry on.
cut this section out. You can continue as is. You don't need to worry about that.
So should I? So would you be posing the question again, and then we take it on
I
from
can
there?
pose the question again.
Okay.
I can just, so this entire chunk we can remove. You can just tell. So Rajen, could you tell us how you got your first break into movies, and how did you manage that with your busy schedule at McKinsey?
Yeah. So firstly, just as a clarification, at that time I was with a different consulting firm, which was iShared Consulting, that eventually got bought out by PricewaterhouseCoopers. McKinsey happened afterwards. But to answer your question, I was still with consulting. It was 3 years since MBA, and I was itching to go back to creative. And so I took a month off and did the film appreciation course at FTII. I think the generalizable lesson that you will see, which you have been speaking about, is that first dip your, like in an old African proverb says that if you want to test the depth of the waters, use 1 foot. So that's what I did, which is still with my job on. I went to FTI for a 1-month course, which was residential. I came back. I joined a screenwriting course called Kalam, in which, you know, I got exposure to a number of great writers and so on, and directors. And the final assignment of that was in pairs. Now, remember, I knew nobody in the film industry, nobody. And my partner, with whom I wrote my final assignment, which was a full script, her neighbor happened to be a small-time producer for television. And small-time, but very creative with an eye for stuff. And so she happened to narrate the story to him. One thing led to the other. It was a made-for-TV original made-for-TV movie at the time for Sahara One, and it was appreciated so much that Star One was just launching, and they then gave the same producer and myself the opportunity to do another one. In this, the director was Anand L. Rai of Tanued's Manu fame now. So we worked together on that. And then the director of the first telefilm, the lead actor of the first telefilm, a guy called Kabir Sadanand, he got a movie deal to become a director. He had worked with me. He gave me a call saying, why don't you write? And so one thing led to the other, and I now have 4 movies that have been produced, and 1 award nomination for the Best Screenwriter Award as well.
Yeah. When one Googles you, I mean, of course, your academic and professional qualifications come up, but so does your writing and so does your movie. So congratulations for that. I'm not sure if everyone can be as Googleable as you, but it's good to see you, make your mark across spectrums. Did you notice that your screenwriting made you a better writer in general, and you were able to, say, put forward more cohesive articles or papers as you've written in books and journals and so forth?
Well, I must say that it's a double-edged sword. Real life, I got invited to write the dialogues for Namaste London from our starrer by Vipul Shah, a very famous director, and so on. Now, I was invited to write the dialogues, but I had certain points of view on the screenplay itself. And the consultant in me, I don't know what happened. He said, okay, so tell me what your thought process is. I went and I created a PowerPoint deck, 20 slides, dissecting the screenplay. That didn't go down too well. I was fired from the role of a dialogue writer. And sometimes I find that in my professional work, I sometimes tend to challenge the boundaries too much and sort of err on the side of the creative and new. In both of those fields, I think it has been a plus and a minus. I think I bring almost an analytical rigor and to creative world, which I think makes things sometimes better, sometimes not quite. And likewise, the creative bent to my management consulting work, which sometimes make things better, sometimes not. What I can say is it makes it distinctive for sure.
Absolutely. You know, when I was writing my book and the article on deep generalists, I talked about how magic happens at intersections. In your case, say combining art with an analytical bent of mind just helps you build your own category. I like to call that category of one. And it reflects throughout your career. Do you want to tell us more about that becoming a double-edged sword in the space of writing and how that has perhaps helped you shape your career in consulting and after?
How that has become a double-edged sword, is that your question?
Yeah. I mean, we're largely interested in understanding how you write and how you are trying to become a better writer and so forth.
I see. So I'm these days considered old school, I suppose, which is I'm quite a, let's call it a devotee of Robert McKee, the famous screenwriting guru, whose students have some 250 Emmys and Oscars put together. And he borrows from Aristotle in his fundamental approach of which Aristotle captured in Principia Dramatica. So I do have a TEDx talk at the National University of Singapore where I've tried to capture some of that. So I follow sort of the 3-act structure. I follow the fundamental principles of expectation-reality gap. Of escalating stakes. So these are some of the principles that I tend to watch out for. The test of whether the audience would root for this character and why, which is a very central tenet of Save the Cat, which is now the more contemporary version of what everybody's referring to in the screenwriting world, at least.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I love the fact that intersectionality keeps coming up. But you also write nonfiction reports. And the last I read was that you had published a chapter in a book and also a journal. Aren't the styles very different? And how does the creative in you make sense of some of those, more, say, rigid forms of writing?
Yeah, I mean, the honest truth would be that the book that you're referring to is the Global Handbook of Impact Investing. And in that, I was invited to write a chapter on leadership, which is how can leadership be used by impact investors as an instrument or a lever to unlock alpha, both alpha impact and alpha returns, financial returns from investee companies. Now, truth be told, my editor, who's also ex-McKinsey and Ashoka Fellow and so on, very prolific gentleman from San Francisco, he basically beat me quite a bit to make sure that the screenwriter out of me was respectfully curtailed to make sure that it was confirming more to the academic style of writing. But I think it's, I enjoy the process. I enjoy getting that feedback. What I enjoy most is mentorship, really, in both forms, where you bounce this off. And of course, my wife happens to be my biggest mentor as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. So 2 questions on that. One is, what was the big takeaway from writing that chapter? What's the larger message that you wanted to share? And second is that tell us about your wife and how she's played the role of a mentor, a sounding board, and so forth.
So the chapter is called Leadership by Results for Impact Investors and Investees. I think there are 3 key ideas in the chapter, and it's built upon the very fortunate coincidence that I had post my McKinsey career to run into this model of leadership, which is called the phenomenological ontological model of leadership. And we don't need to, get stuck in that tongue twister. The three key insights are as follows. Number one, if we dare to call human beings as human capital, and if we dare to say that you're making enough investment into your leaders, then by corollary, we should be willing to stand up and be subjected to everything that an investment is subjected to, i.e., what is the return on investment? And till the day we, as the fraternity of leadership development folks, don't allow ourselves to be subjected to those questions, until then, the responsibility really is on us to get the CEOs, the boards, to actually think about human capital as an investment. So that's kind of number one, that look, it's leadership by results. So let's just make sure, and I've proposed even some EBITDA multiples of how should you decide whether you should go in for a particular leadership program or not, and what are the ways to project that. That's message number one. Message number two is draw the distinction between leadership and tourism. Leadership, which is prompted by go and maybe you like something, maybe you'll meet new people. I guess tourism can do that job. So what's the distinction between leadership, development, investment, and tourism? Well, tie it to a top three goal of the organization that the board is concerned about, that the top team is concerned about, and so on. And make the leadership development contextualized to that particular problem, such that it becomes the arena for practice. And you've not said that my job is simply to provide you with some inputs. Now, what you do with it is really up to you, right? It is my job to be a part in the goals that you're seeking, and I need to be accountable for them, for the goals, not just for feedback from you. The last idea is that let's do this in teams. Let's do this as intact teams, because when it's a really high stakes goal, and now I'm using some of the language from my screenwriting, when it's a high stakes goal, it needs the entire top team to come together. Those are the three sort of key messages.
Yeah, in a typical consulting fashion, you were able to explain that very well. Now, tell us about your wife and how she shaped you as a professional, as a person, as a writer, and so forth.
Well, I think we've so far only talked about the dichotomy of the writing profession and leadership, being a leadership consultant. But I had a few more detours in my life. Like I've had a good 6-7 year stint in the international development and social sector, serving the UN, serving Government of India, worked on Swachh Bharat, and so on and so forth. So I think the shortest way to answer that would be that if there is a portfolio of careers that somebody is pursuing, be assured that there is somebody who is holding the fulcrum, which is allowing for all of this experimentation, and some might say indulgence, to be possible. And that's the role that really she has played as I've navigated all of these multiple areas.
Everyone needs a home, like a fulcrum, a base to build upon. And on Network Capital, our mission is to help everyone find that, those tribe of mentors, that base to get to that level. And we actually love micro experimentations and meanderings. So in the time that you were in development consulting with the UN on Swachh Bharat and so forth, how did you make sense of your career, if at all? What was the thought process behind it? The fact that it looked good on CV is helpful, but that can't be the real story. So tell us what the real story was and what prompted you to indulge in that direction?
So the story is the following. It was 2011. I'd just come back from Shanghai from a client engagement. I was with the consulting firm then. This was with Heidrick & Struggles, where I was one of the early people that set up the leadership advisory practice for them. I remember being in a bus in Singapore and reading news on the BlackBerry at the time, if you remember. And the Times of India headline said that, there is this Gandhian that's fasting at Ramlila grounds. And apparently a Hong Kong investment banker has also just shown up there. And for whatever reason, a line just set off in my mind that, look, a flight goes from Singapore to Delhi as well. And I don't know what sort of came over me, but essentially by the next morning, I was on the plane to Delhi. I came to Ramlila grounds. I knew nobody in Delhi. I'm born and brought up in Mumbai. And I had no idea what a fast looks like, what an agitation looks like, I don't know what you do when you kind of land up. But it turned out to be an absolutely heady experience. It was, the sheer visual sensory feel of it was like Quit India movement meets an India-Pakistan cricket match stadium meets Woodstock Festival. And this, along with the Jagrati Yatra, which I then took in the same December, where I think you might be aware, it's a 9,000-kilometer train journey across India that takes you to social entrepreneurs that have made scale impact. Arvind Eye Care and Tilonia, Barefoot College, and of course ending with Sabarmati Ashram, which is the home of the biggest social entrepreneur of them all. So these two experiences had a fairly significant impact on me. My father, too, right from my childhood, he had been an honest sales tax officer. I mean, somebody that was in sales tax but took bribes. So I'd grown up on those stories. So this sort of made me feel like if I could, I would love to serve clients that are chasing purpose as well as doing well. So doing good and doing well.
Doing good and doing well. It's fascinating. We see that many people want to go down this path, trying to do good, do well, but it's not easy. And we try to, of course, nudge them in the right direction. Are there some practices or ideas that that you've seen people deploy in the current scenario that can help people navigate, say, the social sector, the development sector, and the corporate world?
You mean simultaneously, or you mean to take the job?
Simultaneously. Let's explore the options. You've written about human capital, impact investing. Then you've also not been shy of, say, jumping a sector from one to the other, jumping countries. And now you're back to, in some shape or form, leadership development, leadership capacity. So how do we understand these career changes? Because I think that doing good and doing well are a constant. It's not that you used to want that and don't want that anymore.
Right. So if I understand your question, you're saying, how does one make sense of these myriad stories? Is that what you're
and
saying?
are there some practical ways to navigate these choices?
Right.
Are there decision-making frameworks that you've used?
Right. Got it. So look, I think let me start with the simplest thing that does come to my mind. Does doing good and doing well, that desire, can it ever be could you be been there, done that with that? I don't think so. I think it's just a way of life, right? So so is that still continuing for me? Clearly, certainly on an effort basis it is. For Confetti, I'm the Asia co-lead for ESG solutions. In my development and impact sector time, I was working for the USAID. I was, or rather serving the USAID, I was serving the World Bank, I was serving Asian Development Bank, UN bodies, and so on, in their efforts to engage the private sector on socially inclusive, environmentally friendly business models, right? And now, post the Biden election, COP26, and all that's going on in the world, it looks like the time has probably come. So does that continue? Yes, it does. Vehicle for that changes, sure, but it sort of continues. And again, there's a nonprofit practice, Conferi, and impact investing practice, and so on. So that kind of continues. So that's kind of around the constancy or consistency of that doing well and doing good. Now comes the question of if somebody wants to do that, what are some of the decision frameworks? I would say it is something that you have often talked about. Like I said earlier, first of all, if you are in a world and you want to test the depth of the water in another world, use one foot, don't use both. So figure out ways to dip your toe, figure out ways through volunteerism, through everything that you've spoken about and is said about the hustle economy or the side hustles, etc. I think at some point in time, this becomes a question more about your life's balance sheet.
I love that phrase. Yeah.
And by the life balance sheet, what I mean is on the assets and liabilities side, assets and liabilities are not just the financial ones. There are liabilities like do you have kids, and how far do you want to go in supporting their education? Is that abroad or not? Is it covering for grad and post-grad or not? Do you have old parents who you want to take care of, etc. On the liabilities, on the asset side, it's also network capital, if I may use that word. Social capital, the kind of spouse you have, the kind of expectation the spouse has in terms of their own life vision and so on. So I think sort of draw that life's balance sheet. In fact, I've done some work during the pandemic on a product. I was trying to productize this, and I called it From Emergency to Emergence, which is
E2E. I think consultants like these kinds of phrases.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So draw up your life's balance sheet, and then just like what we do in banks in ALM, right, asset liability management, you look at what are your short-term versus long-term assets and liabilities. A mismatch in that is going to be quite turbulent. So just make sure that there is some degree of matching between your long-term assets, long-term liability, and short-term assets, short-term liability. And that earns you your degrees of freedom.
Yeah.
After you've done that, if you've actually earned your degree of freedom already, do not waste it, use it. And if you haven't, then be prudent.
Got it. Really thoughtful suggestion, Rajen. I just wanted to bounce off and understand the role of spur of the moment, inspiration, or just do it. Do you buy into these philosophies, or are you more intentional and strategic about some of these phases that you've taken?
Actually, I think it's very difficult to be quite objective about oneself in this. Anyone from the outside would definitely say that there is. I think there are certainly some moments that strike me as being the let's just do it. I think two of them strike me particularly right now as we speak. One is that moment when I was reading the BlackBerry for the Anna movement. There's another one where a political leader, no prizes for guessing. I got a call. I just recovered from a liver surgery in Singapore. I happened to be in India on a special permission from my wife to attend a company conference for just one day. I was supposed to just fly back to Singapore. I got a call from this political leader. And the next thing, when I called up my wife, she was thinking I've landed at Singapore, but actually I was calling from Ratlam Junction because I was on a train to Delhi on the spur of the moment, because I felt like this was a possibility to contribute to something much bigger than myself. So I've kind of thought aloud in response to your question, but it looks like there are sufficient number of data points that suggest that the spur of the moment has also worked in my life.
Yeah. When I spoke to you first, which was about a year and a little more back, I thought that this gentleman actually combines the let's do it and let's be intentional about it in a very interesting way. And then, of course, like we've been in touch through Network Capital, and I followed. And it's been a joy to see both happening. I did not know about the Ratlam bit or the other thing that you mentioned about the Singapore BlackBerry bit. But I'm sure that having or balancing this hasn't been easy. So could you talk to us about, say, one biggest challenge of trying to build a portfolio of careers and one deep joy of balancing many hats in your life?
Yeah, I think the challenge is very straightforward, which is that I think you need to cultivate a lot of humility. And what do I mean by that? Is that it's a very specific thing I mean by this.
Yeah.
On one hand, as you're having a conversation with yourselves, you or your friends are talking to you, right? And they would have a fair degree of admiration for the kind of diversity of exposure and all of that you've done. Which makes you kind of unique. And at the same time, when you decide to then shift into a new arena, be it on the development sector, be it on the commercial sector, be it in the creative arts, wherever, it doesn't matter. You are, in some senses, a beginner all over again. So I think what you need to, what you need to really get good at is how do you be an accomplished beginner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And to the extent that you let the accomplishments get to your head, you won't be a good beginner. And to the extent that you let the beginner spirit or the beginner feeling kind of overcome you, then you need to kind of also just go back to the accomplishments and say, yeah, but if I could do that, then I can do this. And that sense of respect, genuine respect for those that have stuck to that particular field, right? I mean, so with the same number of years as you cumulatively, now if they are if they have a certain, let's say, client network or network in Bollywood or whichever way, wherever that person is invested, I think having that very genuine, healthy respect for those folks, for having stuck to it, while not discounting yourselves. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Any parting advice for our viewers on your career, on life, anything, parting wisdom?
Frankly, I'm not very sure if I'm qualified to talk very wisely. All I can say is that I think what I've learned from screenwriting, from being an observer of human beings, from being a coach to very senior leaders, is that ultimately it's the power of conscious choice. I think there are a lot of choices that we are making in the moment at any given point in time. For every single question of yours, there were 360 raised to 360 directions that I could have gone into. I have no idea what prompted me to go to a particular direction. But the more that I can get self-aware of that, the more I can exercise conscious choice. particularly in how I frame situations, right? How I see them, the more it will just lead to efficacy.
Great. Well, Rajan, keep writing, keep creating positive impact, and we look forward to following your career through the years to come. Thank you very much for doing this. So we're going to put the link of your book and the link of your movies and other productions in the show notes, and look forward to having you back with us. Take care.
Thank you so much. And, you too, please keep doing the work that you're doing. You are a beacon of inspiration to people younger and older than you. So please continue to spread this. You are an idea worth spreading.
Thank you, Rajan. Really appreciate that. All of us ONC, we are one team, and I'm thrilled that you're part of our journey. Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye.
Take care.